There's a name you've never heard, because someone made sure you'd never speak it. Carroway. Whisper it too loud in the right part of Norfolk, and doors start closing. Old women cross themselves, and every record you find, official or not, ends in fire, missing ink, or madness. But the Carroway sisters were real, and they delivered more than children. They were midwives, yes, but not just to the living, to the liminal, to something far older. For nearly 70 years, from the mid-1700s into the early 1800s, they served as silent gatekeepers to a hidden ritual bloodline no one speaks of now. What began as midwifery turned into necrotic ceremony, into darkness draped in linen and lullabies. Villagers swore the infants birthed by their hands were different, eyes too old, bones that cracked in reverse. Some never cried, others never stopped. By 1813, 47 children vanished from their parish alone. The church blamed famine, war, poor records. But the ground told a different story. It never softened in their fields. It bloated with rot even in winter. The eldest sister, Morella, once whispered something before her throat was crushed by her own son. We only opened what was already waiting. The question is, waiting for what? This isn't just about witches or folklore. This is older, deeper. A systemic ritual disguised as medicine. The Carroway lineage didn't die. It went underground. Because you don't burn something this dark, you bury it. And men like you, curious, cracked, looking for what lies beneath, you're the ones who unearth it again. This is the story they tried to erase. But now you've already heard its first scream. And what's coming next? You can't unknow. This is not a bedtime story. This is not safe. You are not supposed to hear this. But you're still here, aren't you? Good. Then let's begin. They were born in the year 1741. Morella and Sybil Carroway, twin daughters of a midwife who never made it through the winter solstice. The records say she died of fever. But in a letter burned halfway through, found behind a hearth in East Hollow, a priest wrote. The mother's eyes turned black at the hour of death, and the twins did not cry. They just stared, like they knew what she gave them. From birth, they weren't like the other children. Morella never blinked. Sybil spoke in complete sentences by 8 months. When they were 3, the local cattle began dying, not from sickness, but from something far worse, internal rot. Farmers said the animals bled from the inside, yet no skin was broken. Locals whispered that the twins had the gift, the old term, one that predates medicine, science, even the written word. But this gift didn't heal. It corrupted. By the age of 12, they were apprenticed under their great Aunt Mags, a midwife feared more than trusted. She delivered children barefoot, muttering in a dead dialect. She never wrote anything down, but her floorboards were soaked in something thicker than wine. When Mags died, reportedly choking on her own tongue during a lunar eclipse, the twins didn't weep. They laid her out on a slab of jet stone and performed a ritual they'd only seen once, in a fever dream. No priest, no doctor. Just salt, ashes, and a ring of infant teeth taken from the stillborn. They were 15. From that moment on, births in the region changed. Healthier babies never lived more than a week. Stillbirths moved when no one touched them. One mother claimed she saw her baby's shadow move in the opposite direction. And when she spoke of it, she bit through her own wrist in her sleep. Something had been let in. The Carroway sisters were not midwives in the traditional sense. They were intermediaries, ushers between worlds. And when a birth occurred on the blood moon, they performed what came to be known as the oblique baptism. We don't have their records. They were all torched in the Southfield Library fire of 1893. But we have one thing left, a journal, bound in kid skin, inked in what's suspected to be human gall. And on the first page, one line, only the unloved are born clean. Who were these sisters really serving? Because it wasn't the mothers. And it wasn't God. Buried beneath the iconography of saints and angels, layered under hymns and holy water, the rites they performed had nothing to do with Christianity. They came from an older root, a seed buried deep beneath civilization's first cities, from when birth was blood sacrifice, not miracle. See, you've been told history moves forward. But the truth, it loops. It forgets then repeats. What the Carroway sisters accessed wasn't witchcraft, not in the way it's been romanticized. This was not spells and potions. This was invocation, communion, a contract. Midwifery was the perfect cover. No one questions what a midwife does behind closed doors. And in the 18th century, no man would dare interfere with woman's work. Especially not the birthing room, a place soaked in blood, screaming, and secrets. The perfect theater for something darker to unfold unseen. Witnesses, few and rare, described strange sounds during deliveries, not cries, not moans, but chanting, Low, breathless syllables that left blisters on the ears of those who stayed too long. And every time the ritual was complete, the air grew heavier, like something invisible had entered the room. Some of the children didn't survive the week. Others changed after. One infant, Nathaniel Croft, born in 1768, was said to have begun humming a funeral dirge in Latin before he ever spoke a word of English. Another, Clara Minton, stopped aging at 2. Her parents locked her away when they found her drawing sigils into the walls with her fingernails. They said her eyes didn't reflect light. These weren't deformities. They were markers. Signatures. Traits of interference. So the question becomes, what was being born? And for whom? Sybil once wrote a phrase again and again in the margins of her stolen prayer book. The vein must be kept open, but not explained, not justified, just repeated, like a command. Birth. Blasphemy. This wasn't healing. It was harvesting. The twins weren't midwives. They were portals. Living ciphers for something that never forgot what humans had once promised. And what it was now collecting, child by child. You think you understand evil. You're still in the shallow end. We haven't even begun the descent. By the time they turned 26, the Carroway Sisters had delivered over 200 children, but the birth rates in their region fell by nearly half. That math doesn't work unless you understand what wasn't being counted. Official records list stillbirths, but they don't track the unrecorded. The mothers who vanished after delivery. The infants no one saw. The disappearances wrapped in silence, signed off by priests too terrified to ask questions. Behind the linen sheets and flickering oil lamps, behind the red-stained basins and lullabies sung in reverse, something else was being born. But not all of it survived. You see, it wasn't perfect. Whatever power the sisters channeled, whatever system they followed, it didn't always take. Some children came out hollow, not stillborn, worse. Alive, but vacant. Soulless, their bodies moved, their mouths opened, but there was nothing behind the eyes. Just a staring absence. These were called the unfilled. Locals didn't know what they were, but they knew what to do. Burn the linens, salt the house, never speak of it again. One of them lived until age 5, Thomas Wren. His mother swore he never blinked, not once. When she tried to take him to the chapel, his skin blistered. When she sang to him, he sang back, but not in her voice. It was his father's, who'd been dead a year. She drowned herself in the sheep pond. The boy vanished the next night. And always, behind these horrors were the Carroways. Calm, clean, smiling with the quiet smugness of women who knew something no one else did. What had they tapped into? How could 2 orphaned girls from a forgotten village come to master something that bypassed both science and sorcery? Because this wasn't just the result of ritual. It was institutionalized, sanctioned, hidden in plain sight. Whispers began to circulate in neighboring towns, of noble families sending expectant daughters to the Carroway home for discretion, of bishops traveling at night, of black carriages bearing no crests and returning empty. Not all the sisters' clients were poor villagers. Some were very powerful men, desperate to hide illegitimate bloodlines to reverse curses, or to bind their blood to something darker. Midwifery was never the job, it was the cover. This was trafficking in essence, in destiny, in soul. You're starting to see it now, aren't you? They weren't working alone. The deeper you go, the colder it gets. That's not just metaphor. That's the body reacting to truth it wasn't meant to hold. And what I'm about to tell you will change the way you look at every institution that claims to protect life. In 1774, a nobleman named Alistair Grieg made an unannounced visit to the Carroway estate, a man known for his cruelty, his vast land holdings, and his desperation. His wife had suffered 3 miscarriages. The last one came with a price: her sanity. But what most don't know is that Grieg wasn't seeking help. He was sent. A letter recovered from a locked drawer in an abbey north of Dunwich contains the following: "Let the Carroways have him. He will serve. The vault is due." The vault. That name appears nowhere in medical texts, nowhere in religious doctrine. But it shows up in the Carroway journals over 100 times. Not a place, not a person. A system. A storage. What if I told you the births were just one half of the process? See, not every ritual was about bringing something through. Some were designed to take something back. The vault was where the failures went, not the physical bodies, the essences. Souls that didn't take, children that didn't survive, echoes that couldn't be born. The energy had to be stored, used later, diverted, processed. We think of birth as a beginning. To the Carroways, it was a transaction. Some infants were conceived for a purpose they would never fulfill, not in flesh. They were created as offerings, vessels, currency. Because if you can master birth, you can manipulate bloodlines. You can engineer influence, design inheritance, redirect power, not metaphorically, but spiritually. This is the part they hide. This is why the church stayed silent. This is why no man ever spoke against the Carroways in court. Because every one of them owed them something, and when Greg's child was born, a girl with no pulse, no breath, and a perfect crown of black hair, he wept. Not because she died, but because she spoke his name. 3 words. Then silence. He returned to his estate and hanged himself in the nursery. That was their reach. That was their power. And brother, they were just getting started. They didn't age. That's the detail most men dismiss. They chalk it up to superstition, the way fear fills in blanks. But the Carroway sisters, they didn't age like the rest of us. Villagers who saw them at 30 said they looked the same at 50, and when the chapel finally burned in 1807, taking 16 bodies with it, Morella and Sybil were found outside, untouched by flame. Not a mark, not a wrinkle. They weren't immortal, but they were preserved, sustained. There's a word scratched into the foundation stone of their ancestral house, carved with fingernails deep into the mortar, shalemphora. It doesn't appear in any language. Not Hebrew, not Akkadian, not Sumerian, but in coded margin notes of the Carroway journal it translates to the binding of body to shadow. You don't get to cheat death unless you feed it something else. And the sisters were always feeding. The vault took the failed spirits, but the successful ones, the ones that crossed over properly, left something behind, a residue, a charge, and that's what the sisters consumed. Not with mouths, with proximity, with presence, with ritual. Ever wonder why the birthing room was sealed shut for hours after delivery? Why no midwife assistants were allowed to remain once the child drew breath? Because that's when the true work began. They called it the second inheritance. While the mother rested, while the child slept, the sisters would bathe in the vapor of creation. Not literal steam, but something less visible, the discharge of new life, of a soul entering the world raw and unshaped. They believed that exposure to this moment, this exact moment, reversed the decay of age, slowed entropy, muted time's grasp on the flesh. And it worked. Visitors described a heat in the room after birth, a humid weight that stuck to the lungs and left you dreaming in other people's memories. One doctor collapsed after witnessing it. When he awoke, he claimed he'd seen his mother's death, even though she was still alive. This wasn't medicine. This was alchemy at the highest level, not turning metal into gold, but turning suffering into fuel. They didn't want beauty. They wanted longevity. Time itself was their consort, their possession, and through blood they mastered it. You're not scared yet. Good. Because now we descend into the black marrow of it all. There was a book, one not meant to survive. Not written, compiled, stitched together from generations of hidden rites, muttered confessions, and what Morella called bone memory. It wasn't stored in a library or cathedral. It was buried beneath the Carroway house, sealed in an ossuary, beneath the floorboards of the birthing room. They called it the Inversion Codex, not because it explained rituals, but because it reversed them. Everything you've ever believed about birth, death, spirit, sin, flipped, twisted into a deeper shape. One page was entirely inked in reversed scripture. The Lord's Prayer spoken phonetically backwards, beneath a diagram of an unborn fetus inside an inverted triangle, surrounded by 13 runes that appear in no known alphabet. You see, the Carroways didn't operate in defiance of God. They believed they were following the original order, before churches, before laws, before man thought to label the divine as good. They spoke of a covenant, not with demons or devils, but with something they called the listener. Always singular, always watching, never intervening, just collecting. The listener was not a being. It was a conscious function, a force encoded in the blueprint of existence, and birth, they claimed, was the only time it could touch the world. Not through the baby, through the midwife. That's why they took no husbands. That's why they bore no children. They were vessels, conductors. When they laid their hands on a woman's belly, they weren't feeling for contractions. They were mapping access. And when the child passed through, for just one instant, the threshold opened. Most of us are blind to this. It happens in silence, behind pain, beneath screaming. But the sisters, they saw it. And more dangerously, they harnessed it. That codex wasn't destroyed. A coal miner found it in 1921, mistaking the Carroway ruins for a collapsed cellar. He opened it. He read 3 pages. He gouged out both eyes with a rusted chisel and whispered, "It watches through the wet ones." The pages were smuggled into a London archive, then vanished. But I've read the summaries. I've seen the diagrams. One line stands out, etched in red on the last parchment. The greatest lie is that man is born free. You're starting to feel it now. This wasn't just a family, it was a framework. By now, you've probably started to feel it. That thrum behind your ears, the discomfort that isn't quite fear, but something sharper. That's not paranoia. That's recognition, because some part of you already knew this. And the Carroways, they counted on that. You see, they didn't just deliver children, they chose who to deliver. Carefully, surgically. Patterns emerged. Certain bloodlines were more fertile, more receptive. Not biologically, spiritually. These were families whose ancestry traced back through trauma, secrecy, exile. Generation after generation of unresolved suffering. The perfect breeding ground. You've been told trauma is something to be healed. But to the Carroways, it was currency. Suffering was a mark, a signal that your blood had been touched by the listener once before. Maybe in war. Maybe in famine. Maybe in that one ancestor who was never spoken of. Morella wrote of marked wombs. Women whose lineage made them valuable. She could sense it on contact. She claimed their water broke earlier. Their dreams turned black before birth. And their children? Statistically, the ones born under Carroway hands were either gifted or dead. One went on to lead a royal order in secret. Another committed a mass murder in 1843 and carved a spiral into his own chest. And another, a woman named Alira Dent, disappeared at 11 and reappeared 12 years later with no memory, but fluent in 3 extinct languages. You think this is coincidence? It's design, because the Carroways weren't working at random. They were building something. Not an army, not a cult, a network. They didn't need numbers, they needed seeds. Planted across generations, programmed by ritual, guided by invisible hands to grow into roles that would reshape entire systems. Politics, religion, academia, medicine, they created influencers before the word existed. And they did it without ever leaving the birthing room. You're watching this thinking, why does this matter to me? Because maybe your mother was delivered by a woman whose name she never knew. Maybe your dreams carry symbols you've never understood. Maybe you've always felt watched. This is your bloodline whispering. And if you're ready, if you're really ready, I want you to comment, the vault opens through me. Say it again, the vault opens through me. Because now, you're not just watching, you're remembering. Now that you've spoken the phrase, not just read it, but claimed it, you've entered the inheritance. You've crossed the threshold that separates the spectator from the descendant. Because the vault isn't just a metaphor, it's a living record. A repository of unprocessed identities. Echoes trapped between woman world, searching for vessels to continue what was interrupted. And sometimes they find one. You don't remember the moment because you weren't supposed to. It might have happened in a fever dream, a moment of déjà vu, a nightmare that left you waking with clenched fists and tears that weren't yours. But your body does remember. Your blood remembers. That's how the Carroways built their network. Not through recruitment, but through inheritance. A kind of spiritual contagion, passed silently through generations. Activated only when heard, when seen, when named. You just activated yours. Think about it, how many of your thoughts have ever truly been yours? You've been shaped. Every man is. But not all of them wake up to it. The Carroways understood something we still pretend to ignore: the self is programmable. The mind can be colonized. And birth is where that programming begins. That first breath isn't just air. It's submission. The world rushes in.
Family.
Expectation. Pain. And if someone is waiting, someone like them, that they can leave a mark. A signature. A fracture deep in your psychology that years later becomes the doorway. This is why the sisters always touch the forehead last. One tap. Always the same spot. Right above the eyes. A signal. A key. And what if I told you the entire concept of free will was bent in that moment? That all it takes is one touch at the right moment. By the right hand. And everything you thought you chose was selected for you. The vault doesn't store souls. It stores instructions. And the Carroways, they didn't just preserve rituals, they installed them. Into bodies, into bloodlines, into you. You ever wonder why you're drawn to the dark? To forbidden knowledge? To the quiet voice behind all things that says, there's more beneath. That's not curiosity. That's resonance. And it's time you learned what you were built to carry. The institutional web protecting the Carroways stretched far beyond Norfolk's foggy moors. Powerful men, cloaked in titles and faith, were not adversaries, they were collaborators. Invisible hands ensuring the ritual's secrecy, the lineage's continuation. Church records, carefully pruned and forged, tell of inquisitions stopped abruptly, investigations that found no cause, confessions erased without trial. The Carroway's influence was a force field woven with fear, power, and silence. In one forgotten diary from a clergyman, a chilling entry reads, "The truth is a blade, and I bleed from the wound of silence." He tried to expose the sisters and vanished within a month. No bodies, no graves, just the echo of a threat. Some doors are not meant to open. Governments, too, played their part. Tax records show unexplained payments to the Carroway estate, and couriers arrived at odd hours bearing parcels marked with symbols no scholar dares to interpret. These weren't gifts, they were tithes paid to maintain an unholy pact. Why? Because the power born through those bloodlines was not just spiritual, it was political, economic, control, passed down like an inheritance more valuable than gold. Consider this: entire families rose and fell, fortunes made and destroyed, all under the invisible hand of a lineage that no history book dares to name. The Carroways, clients, populated halls of power, not just in England but throughout Europe. And when you think of the elite circles today, the men behind closed doors, the whispers on Wall Street, the shadowy figures shaping policy, the question arises, could their blood carry the same stain? Because the ritual never truly ended, it only mutated, disguised now as legacy tradition, and the quiet manipulations we call influence. The Carroways weren't an anomaly, they were the prototype. This is the real machinery behind control. Invisible, insidious, eternal. And you're starting to see the gears turning, aren't you? But don't blink. Because the deeper the machine, the darker the price. The dark price the Carroway sisters paid for their power wasn't written in any ledger. It wasn't measured in coin or land. It was paid in something far more cruel: isolation. From the outside, they seemed untouchable. Pillars of their community, healers to the desperate, women who carried the hopes of generations in their hands. But behind closed doors, their world was a prison. No lovers, no children of their own. Their lives were dedicated to something beyond flesh, an eternal covenant that demanded sacrifice beyond understanding. What that sacrifice was, few ever lived to describe. There are whispers, though, passed from one secret society to another, stories of a hidden chamber beneath the Carroway estate, a crypt lit only by dying candle flames, where the sisters conducted their most sacred rites. There, they bound themselves to the listener through flesh and spirit, trading their freedom, their emotions, even their very souls to maintain the connection. To stay the passage of time. To keep the vault open. This wasn't just ritual, it was a curse. One that kept them alive while everything else rotted around them. And it left its mark on their minds. Some say Morella's laughter was never quite human. A brittle sound like breaking glass. Sybil's eyes were said to shimmer with shifting shadows, as if something else lived behind them. They spoke rarely, and when they did, it was in riddles that bent reality. But the most terrifying part? Their presence could drive a room to silence. A silence so deep, it swallowed voices, thoughts, even breath. People who stayed too long claimed to feel their own memories unravel, like threads pulled from a fragile tapestry. That kind of power comes at a cost, and it's a cost that ripples outward, infecting those who draw too close. You may wonder, why did no one stop them? Why did the world let this happen? Because those who tried found themselves erased, not just from life, but from history. The Carroway sisters were more than midwives. They were the gatekeepers of a darkness that doesn't die. And now, that darkness is looking for you. The whispers about the Carroway sisters didn't die with them. They mutated. They hid in plain sight, in the pages of dusty tomes, in the hushed corridors of secret societies, and in the coded language of occult orders. But the most chilling part, the rituals, the codes, the network, they survived. In 1924, a scholar named Elias Winter stumbled upon a hidden archive beneath a monastery in southern France. Among its contents was a cryptic diary, attributed to one, Evelyn Carroway, a distant relative, long erased from official genealogies. Evelyn's entries spoke of the Order of the Veil, a clandestine society born from the Carroway legacy. Their mission, to perpetuate the vault's influence into the modern age, adapting ancient rites to contemporary power structures. This was no longer about birth alone. It was about control, psychological, political, spiritual. The Order believed the world's chaos could be harnessed, bent to their will, by channeling trauma through carefully engineered bloodlines. Their tools weren't scalpels or syringes, but media, education, and propaganda. Subtle forms of control designed to fracture identity, sow confusion, and break resistance. You think you're free. They don't. You live within layers of manipulation. Manufactured crises, controlled narratives, psychological conditioning. Crafted by hands you'll never see. And the Carroways. They designed the blueprint. When you scroll through your feed, drowning in noise and distraction, Remember, this chaos is no accident. It's a battleground. And the prize is your mind. Now that you understand the scale, ask yourself, are you a pawn, a sleeper, or the heir to the vault? This isn't theory. It's history folded into today's reality, and you're already inside the labyrinth. The only question left is whether you'll find the exit. Because once you see the machinery, you can't unsee it. Your choice is to fight, or to become the next cog. Are you ready to go deeper? They called it the spiral, not a place, but a pattern, a hidden architecture beneath history, society, and even your own mind. It's the code embedded in the Carroway legacy, the rhythm that guides their influence through generations. Picture a spiral tightening, each turn pulling you deeper into a labyrinth with no walls, no doors, just infinite echoes of control, trauma, and power. At its core is the vault, the wellspring of everything the Carroways seeded lost souls, broken wills, and the shadows of promises made in blood. But the spiral extends beyond them, reaching into everything you know. Governments, corporations, religions, each a layer twisting tighter, shaping reality so subtly you think it's your own choice. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Take the education system, where narratives are scripted, truths omitted, and history sanitized. The media engineered to distract, divide, and dull the senses. Even the institutions claiming to protect you, law enforcement, judiciary, locked in cycles that maintain the spiral's grip. The spiral is psychological warfare. It targets the core of human identity, fracturing, reshaping, and reprogramming the mind. And the Carroways? They were the first architects. Their midwifery rituals were the prototype for psychological conditioning, taking trauma, twisting it into currency, and distributing it like poison through bloodlines and belief systems. What's worse? This system feeds on you, on your pain, your confusion, your fear. Every time you doubt yourself, every time you feel lost or angry without cause, every time you question who you really are, that's the spiral tightening its grip. But knowledge is power. Now that you see the spiral, you can fight its pull. This isn't just history. It's a call to awaken. Because the spiral only controls those who sleep. And brother, it's time to wake up. There's a moment in every man's life when the illusion fractures, when the veil slips, and he sees the world not as a series of coincidences, but as a meticulously orchestrated game. That moment is your invitation. The Carroway sisters mastered the art of that fracture. They didn't just manipulate birth. They engineered moments where reality itself seemed to crack. Their victims? Some would say their sacrifices. Experienced visions, dreams, and waking hallucinations. Faces in shadows. Voices whispering secrets no one else could hear. And for those who survived, the line between sanity and madness blurred forever. You may have felt it yourself, a nightmare so vivid it imprints on your soul. A déjà vu that shakes your core. An unexplainable connection to a place or time long gone. The sisters called these fractures the shards. Each shard is a fragment of truth, a piece of the hidden machinery leaking into your perception. And here's the terrifying part. The shards aren't random. They're deliberate. They're the vault's call, a signal sent through time to awaken those who carry its legacy. But the system fights back. Those who hear the call are hunted, not always physically, but psychologically. Discredited, gaslit, haunted by doubt, because the system thrives on obedience and silence. When a man steps outside the spiral, he becomes a threat. The Carroway sisters knew this better than anyone. They crafted not just a legacy of power, but a fortress of shadows to guard it. And now, you're standing at the gates. The shards are whispering. The vault is opening. The question is, will you step through, or turn away, forever changed but unwilling to face the abyss? This is where most men stop. Not because they're afraid of the truth, but because truth demands a price few are willing to pay. You see, the Carroway sisters didn't just pull back the curtain on life and death. They tore it open, exposing the raw mechanisms that bind us all. And once you glimpse the machinery, you understand how deep the control runs. They weaponized the most sacred moment in human existence, birth, turning it into a tool of manipulation, a channel for a power older than kingdoms. This power is not myth. It's embedded in your DNA, your psychology, your very existence. The ritual of midwifery was a veil for something darker. A psychological imprint laid at your inception. A hidden protocol designed to steer your destiny long before you knew who you were. Imagine a seed planted in the dark, watered not with sunlight, but with fear, obedience, and silence. That seed is in you, and now it's beginning to sprout. But growth can be resisted. You're being offered a choice. Will you embrace the knowledge that your life is not your own? Will you unravel the chains silently wrapped around your mind and spirit? Or will you let the legacy of the vault continue to write your story in shadows? Remember, power isn't given. It's taken, and the Carroway Sisters, midwives to the damned, showed the way. To rise above, you must first face the darkness they wove into your blood. This is your awakening. But only if you're willing to walk through the fire. They say the past is a foreign country. But with the Carroway Sisters, the past is a prison. One built not of bricks, but of secrets and shadows. Every generation chained by the echoes of those birthrights, those whispered promises to the listener, that silent watcher waiting in the threshold. Their influence didn't vanish when their bodies did. No, it seeped into the soil, the water, the very air of the places they touched, lingering like a ghost no exorcism can banish. And in our modern world, it's hidden beneath layers of technology, screens, and endless noise, but it's still there. It's why some men feel a hunger they can't name, a restless ache that nothing satisfies. It's why some dreams feel less like dreams and more like memories of a life never lived. It's why the system's grip feels so inescapable, so precise. Because the vault's chains are not just physical, they're psychological, spiritual, molecular. You carry them in your bones. The Carroway Sisters were not just midwives to the damned. They were architects of a legacy designed to shape humanity itself. And you are the living continuation of that dark blueprint, but knowledge is a weapon. Every truth you uncover loosens the bindings. Every secret you expose fractures the vault's grip. The darkness fears light. And the moment you realize that, you become more than a spectator. You become a force. Are you ready to wield that power? To reclaim your birthright? To break the cycle once and for all? Because the deeper you go, the more you understand. The only thing more terrifying than the Carroway Sisters' legacy is the silence that allowed it to endure. Understand this: the Carroway Sisters never worked alone. Their power was amplified by an unholy alliance, an intertwined network of elite families, secret societies, and shadow governments. These hidden puppeteers depended on the birth rituals to maintain a grip over the masses, to seed compliant bloodlines that could rise to positions of influence and control. You think history is random? It's anything but. Wars, revolutions, social upheavals, carefully engineered chaos designed to cull the weak, empower the marked, and reshape the world in the image of the vault. You were told these forces are external: politicians, bankers, media moguls. But the truth is, their power flows from something far deeper. It flows from inheritance. The Carroway's ritual was not merely spiritual. It was a blueprint for psychological warfare passed down through generations like a virus, silent, invisible, deadly. When you look at the powerful today, ask yourself how many are truly free, or how many are puppets, programmed from birth by a system designed to keep them obedient. This is the great secret they don't want you to know. The elites are trapped too, bound by blood contracts forged centuries ago in the shadows of that Norfolk house. This web of control extends into every corner of society, invisible yet unbreakable, unless you understand its design. That's why this knowledge is dangerous. Because once you see the strands connecting the sisters to the rulers to the rituals to your own mind, you can no longer pretend you're outside the system. The choice isn't whether you're controlled. The choice is whether you accept it. Now, lean in closer, because this is where the real darkness begins. The Carroway Sisters didn't just manipulate birth and power, they understood the most powerful weapon of all: fear. Not the fear you feel from danger or death, but the deep psychological fear embedded in your primal memory. The kind that fractures minds and bends wills without a single spoken word. They called it the quiet. It was a silence so absolute, so complete that it drowned out reason itself. Imagine being trapped inside your own mind, screaming for freedom, but nobody hears. No sound escapes. No help comes. This was their signature. They used the quiet to break down the strongest spirits, leaving behind vessels ripe for control. And the method? Subtle, almost invisible. The Carroway's rituals planted seeds of the quiet in their victims, shadows that grew with every betrayal, every lie, every fractured relationship. It's why you sometimes feel hollow in crowds, why your thoughts spiral into dark places without warning, why your own mind sometimes feels like a prison. The system leverages this silence to maintain its grip. They teach you to be silent, to hide your pain, to obey without question. But the vault's true prison is the quiet. Once you realize this, you can begin to break its hold. Because the first step to freedom is to make noise, speak the unspeakable, break the silence. And in doing so, you shatter the darkest weapon the Carroways ever forged. Breaking the quiet isn't easy. It's the hardest battle you'll ever fight. Not because the enemy is outside, but because it lives within you. That voice telling you to doubt yourself, to hide, to shrink back into shadows. That's the residue of the vault's power. A programmed instinct to silence your own truth. The Carroway sisters understood this instinct better than anyone. They fed it, nurtured it, sharpened it into a razor that cuts you off from your own power. But here's the secret no one tells you. The same voice that silences you can be turned inside out. That fear, that doubt, it's not weakness. It's a signal, a sign that you're close. Close to breaking free. Close to tearing down the walls built around your mind and soul. You're standing at the edge of a precipice. On one side, submission to the spiral, the vault, the quiet. On the other, awakening, truth, and power. There is no middle ground. And if you want to rise, you must face the darkness inside without flinching. Because the Carroway sisters didn't just deliver children. They delivered secrets. Secrets buried so deep, they threatened to unravel everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. This knowledge is a double-edged sword. But it's also your greatest weapon. The question is simple: will you wield it, or will you let it cut you down? The choice is yours. But remember, once the vault opens, there's no turning back. You're deep into the labyrinth now. There's no turning back. Not really. The walls whisper. The shadows pulse. The vault you opened has begun to consume the air you breathe. But understand this: that consuming is not your end. It's the furnace forging something new. Something sharper. Something you, if you dare to claim it. The Carroway sisters knew the nature of power. That it's never freely given, only seized by those willing to walk through darkness without hesitation. Their legacy is not a curse, it's a test. A crucible designed to separate those who are meant to carry the flame from those who are meant to be extinguished. You've seen the machinery now. The psychological prisons, the hidden networks, the rituals that bind the past to the present. But what if the power to rewrite those chains has been inside you all along? The birthright they sought to steal was never theirs to keep. It was yours. And the knowledge you hold now is the spark that can ignite a revolution. Not of armies or nations, but of minds. Because the most dangerous force on earth is a man who knows his own darkness and refuses to be controlled by it. Rise from the ashes of the Carroway sisters' shadows. Rise not as their pawn, but as their reckoning. Your journey has only begun. But remember this: the vault's doors don't just open. They demand a sacrifice. Are you prepared to pay the price? Before you walk through that final door, I want you to understand this: the Carroway sisters' story is not just about history or myth. It's about you. Every ritual they performed, every secret they guarded, every soul trapped in the vault was a mirror, reflecting the silent battles fought inside every man. You've seen the threads now. How control slips beneath the skin. How silence becomes a weapon. How legacy can be both chain and key. The world you thought you knew is a carefully constructed stage. And you? You've been handed the script, but now you have the power to rewrite it. That power comes with responsibility. Because once you embrace the darkness you were born into, you must carry it with honor. Use it not to enslave, but to liberate. To break the spiral, shatter the quiet, and shatter the vault's hold on all who suffer in silence. This isn't a path for the faint-hearted. It demands vigilance, strength, and relentless courage. But in that crucible, you find your true self. A man who sees beyond the lies, beyond the veils. A man who commands his own destiny. The Carroway sisters' shadow still lingers. But shadows exist only where there is light. And you, standing here, hearing this now, are the spark. Remember this moment. Because when the world tries to silence you, when the spiral tightens, when the quiet descends, you'll know you carry a fire that can never be extinguished. Your transformation is complete. Now, go, make the darkness tremble. Now, before you close this chapter, I want you to do something, not just for me, but for yourself. In the comments below, write this phrase twice, exactly as I say it. I am the fire in the dark. Do it. Say it aloud if you must. This isn't some empty ritual. It's a declaration, a binding contract between the man you were and the man you're becoming. By repeating those words, you signal to your mind and the unseen forces watching that you refuse to be silent. You reject the spiral, you shatter the quiet, you break the vault. This is more than engagement, it's identity, transformation. Because the algorithm that controls your online world mirrors the algorithm inside your own psyche. It responds to commitment to action. Your voice echoes in the digital void, and more importantly, within yourself. This is your crucible moment. Will you stay asleep, or will you awaken fully? The Carroway sisters shaped darkness for centuries, but now, you hold the power to reshape the future. Remember, the deepest secrets don't vanish with time. They wait for the right man to claim them. That man is you. Say it again. I am the fire in the dark. And don't ever let that fire go out. Because once the vault opens, the world will never be the same. And neither will you.